Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement. Welcome back, everybody. Today, we are talking about probably one of the harder parts of our experience of motherhood and matrescence, the part that we often don't talk about. We cover in shame and guilt, and we wonder why it is happening to us, whether there's something wrong with us, whether we are, quote unquote, a bad mother. It is the outbursts, the maternal rage, the anger that some of us experience when we are totally overwhelmed and burnt out by the realities of motherhood that so many of us, including me, have kept hidden and ashamed about. As you'll hear in this interview, it was actually one of the biggest parts of my own experience of becoming a mother that led me to first doing this work for myself and now creating Mama Rising and everything I do. The anger that I felt inside of me frightened me, and I didn't understand why. That's why I was so excited to reach out to today's guest and invite her to come on to the program to talk about emotional flooding. You're about to hear an incredible interview with Gayane Aramyan. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Los Angeles, specializing in perinatal therapy. She works with parents both postpartum and pregnancy and beyond around their own emotions, their own experience of parenthood, and how to regulate themselves. And also, really importantly, understand where this emotional flooding, these big feelings, these outbursts come from. She has a master's degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy. And she is an advanced trainer in anger management. She also does EFT and grief processing and ACT and internal family systems. In other words, she is the perfect person to talk to all of us about our emotions and how we can regulate them and stop beating ourselves up about them. Enjoy. Gayane, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. Thank you for making time for coming on and speaking to mamas all over the world about your expertise in this area. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to start by letting our audience know your area of expertise? Because I'm offered a lot of people to come on this podcast, and I always look into their background and what they've done. And when I was looking at the areas that you have studied and the skills that you bring to new parents, I was really impressed. You've obviously found your passion and your area of expertise, the thing that you love to do. So could you share that with everybody and how you came into this work?
Sure. Thank you so much for that, by the way. So I got started out in the field when I was 18 years old. I became an assistant to a very well-known therapist in the community, and I kind of was under her wing for throughout my whole schooling process, basically. And my first experience in the field was getting certified as an anger management facilitator. For that, you didn't have to have like a master's, and you could do that while you still go to school. And so that was my first experience. And as I went through my journey and started out in private practice, eventually, I left her group practice and started out on my own. How I got started in the perinatal world is in 2020, I got pregnant in the midst of the pandemic. And I was actually finishing up my hours for the clinical exam that I would have to take for my boards. And I decided, wasn't smart of me, but I decided that I'm going to study for my board exam with a newborn in the
As we
postpartum,
do.
as we do. And I am not saying this by any means to say, wow, yay me. No, I wish I didn't put myself through that, but of course I did. And, it really made the postpartum even harder than it already was. And at 6 months postpartum, I also got diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So to add on, to the list of all the struggles I was dealing with, I also dealt with that, which of course impacts your mood, and it caused depression for me and all the things. So going through all of that made me realize how little I knew about the postpartum phase, even though I was already a therapist. So, after going through my own journey, of course, getting on medication for hypothyroidism, healing my postpartum journey, I got trained in perinatal mental health, and I decided that it's going to be my job, my mission in life to prepare expecting parents for the postpartum phase. Reality is I get the phone call 6 weeks postpartum usually, and so my goal is to really change that and to start these conversations before someone gives birth.
Mm. It's really interesting. I had a very similar experience. I was diagnosed with postpartum thyroiditis, which ended up becoming Hashimoto's at
Oh,
4 months postpartum. And I've seen a lot of research and insights into autoimmune diseases for women in particular, that it is often, I don't know if I want to say triggered, but it often goes hand in hand with these over expectations, this burnout, this committing to too much, this ignoring or not understanding what the body's signals are that we need to slow down and rest. And when I hear a fellow overachieving, highly motivated woman talk about an autoimmune disease like a thyroid disease, I think, oh, yes, there it is again.
yeah, absolutely. It's stress induced,
Mhm.
and it's so common now. And my job in the beginning of seeing a client is to make sure we rule out any medical issues, any medical causes. And oftentimes, even when I was experiencing the depressive symptoms, when I went to my OB and I said I want to get my blood work done at 6 months postpartum, the symptoms I was describing to her, she was kind of minimizing my experience and just saying, I mean, she validated that it's like normal mom stuff, but she minimized my need to get tested. And I pushed for it because somewhere along the lines I read about advocating for your hormones. And she called me and she was very surprised. And she said, your thyroid is almost non functioning.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's so often that women can get their hormones dismissed, and of course it acts out as depression or anxiety if it's hyperthyroidism. So yes, absolutely, it's stress induced. There's so much science and research to back up that what we do and how we handle stress and how we the load we put on ourselves affects our body and our internal being.
Mm. Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. And it's so good that we're starting to have those conversations. Like my first baby is now 17. So the difference that I've seen in the last 15 years of the awareness around asking for those blood tests. I've even seen studies around iron deficiency post a traumatic birth that is often shows up as depression, but actually it's just massive anemia. So for everyone who's listening, who's feeling like, oh, I just don't feel quite right, I just think that's a beautiful reminder. Before we move into the next topic, a beautiful reminder to advocate for yourself, to get that blood work and to check what's going on, especially in that postpartum period. Can we go back to what you were saying, though, about this hope, this desire to be able to catch those mamas before the 6-week postpartum and the threads have started unraveling.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about why? Why do you think we are still, even in this day and age, so unprepared for the emotional, hormonal, of course, but the emotional changes that we experience postpartum?
I believe that a lot of it is caused by fear. I think, people are afraid of information. I mean, even in my life, my best friends, one of them is pregnant, and she always tells me that I scare her with the reality.
Yes.
And yes, it is scary. And the reality is that the whole thing is scary. You're raising a human being, and the changes that happen aren't talked enough about. And I think maybe it's evolutionary, meaning if people knew too much, maybe that would keep them from actually getting pregnant and giving birth. So part of it is like this brain that says like that's not information I want to know, and I'll just go through it and figure it out myself. Well, that's great. I don't think it should be the extreme of either, right? We shouldn't be There's no way to be overly prepared and know everything that's going to happen in the postpartum phase, but we shouldn't also be just completely oblivious and know nothing about it. Um,
Mm.
I took so many classes when I was pregnant, for breastfeeding prep, CPR prep, and all these birthing classes, all these different type of classes. I don't recall ever coming across mental health prep, for the mom, for the parents, for the relationship changing. And what I see in the postpartum phase, especially with my clients, is one of the main common things they all say is, I wish someone told me about this.
Yeah.
I wish someone normalized this. They ask, "Is this normal? Have you ever felt this?" And I'm like, "Yes." And I'm so honest with my clients. I do share a little bit about my life in the sense that I want them to know what they're experiencing isn't isolating. They're not the only ones experiencing it. And if and if only people talked enough about it, it would feel a little bit more common.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I really wanted to explore relationships postpartum and in parenthood with you as well. I think we may be doing a little bit better in having these conversations publicly in social media. We have to do a lot more in the actual health system around matrescence and that postpartum mental well-being and maternal well-being. But I find that the one area that we're almost ignoring even more is the impact on relationships. And after listening to and coaching and speaking to mums about all of the experiences for more than a decade, often one of the big struggles I hear about, and I'm sure you do too, is this internal feeling that exhausted new mums feel towards their partner that really surprises them. They went into this so excited and ready and like, oh my gosh, we're going to be parents together. And maybe there's this beautiful bubble at first. But as she becomes more depleted, as she is more overwhelmed, maybe isolated because her partner's gone back to work and we are raising these babies at home by ourselves, there's this internal sort of anger, resentment that is building and building. And because we don't talk much about that, we hold it in, we push it down, we think, oh my gosh, maybe this relationship, there's something wrong with it. And it is just this really sad cycle of not knowing why we feel the way we do. And it's deeply affecting our connection with our partner in those early years. You, in your work, do a lot around relationships and how to work through those periods. Can you explain to us, first of all, emotional flooding what that is, because I deeply believe, like you said before, if we talked about this and normalized it and put words and an understanding around it, we can begin to forgive ourselves a little bit. So, can you talk to us about what that is first?
Yeah, emotional flooding, is really whenever someone is flooded with the feelings, right? That they haven't processed. And so they kind of overtake the whole situation and you're not able to think clearly. The logical part of the brain turns off and the emotional part of the brain is wired, and it's almost like you're fighting for safety, you're running away, right? Or you're freezing as if there's immediate danger. But in reality, maybe it's your spouse making a snarky comment and that's how you're reacting. So, whenever a partner hasn't processed any sort of emotions that are lingering and they get into a little bit of a disagreement with their partner, they might become emotionally flooded and not be able to be clear about what they're needing, what they are upset about. And so that happens often, especially in postpartum, because you also have these other filters of being exhausted, sleep deprived. Maybe you're hungry, maybe you're not taken care of, maybe you haven't showered for days, right? So there's all these different kind of filters, as I call them, that also impact the way you're showing up in your relationship. But that's what happens when you're emotionally flooded. You're unable to see things clearly, and you might say things you don't mean. You might do things you don't mean, because that emotional part of the brain is so triggered.
Mm. In our training in Mama Rising, we talk a lot around self silencing and how, as women, we often hold in what we want to say or how we want to express ourselves because we're hyper aware of what it might mean to the other person. What I've seen in my own life and also in so many mamas is that we sort of fluctuate between this silencing ourselves because we don't want to sound crazy, or we don't want to be a bitch, or we don't want to say the wrong thing, we don't want to offend anybody, we don't want to make it worse, and then being completely flooded by all the things that we haven't said and all the feelings that we were feeling. And it's this exhausting cycle of trying to keep quiet and trying to keep a lid on it, and then exploding.
Yeah, extreme.
Yeah, it's the extremes, and I feel like it's because some of us have never been able to know how to express ourselves in a healthy, safe way. And then you add, like you said, all the other filters on top. And we really don't have these skills. And it's pretty heartbreaking because here is this new mama who's trying to figure this all out, and she's trying to express how she's feeling, but she doesn't know how to do that because she's never really felt safe doing that. And then her body's flooded with all of these hormones. Oh, what do,
Yeah,
what can we say to those beautiful mums who feel like they're these two extremes of trying to
yeah,
put the mask of motherhood on and pretend that everything's okay and not upset anybody, and then
yeah, yeah. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is that we are human beings and, it's okay to feel things. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to struggle. We aren't meant to know how to do this from the start. That confidence of being a mom is built and rebuilt. It's crushed down and then you build it back up again. It's never this consistent 100% of the time feeling confident as a mom, right? And so first, I think the acknowledgement of you are going to fail in some ways, right? You are going to be great in many other ways, but there is no this like one way of being in motherhood. The other part is that it's important for a new mom to sit with her feelings, with her thoughts and emotions, and maybe write them and journal about them, right? Whether it's in her phone or in a notebook, just write it somewhere because when it's sitting inside of you, it's not going to do you any good if you're not able to process. Of course, if you have a therapist that you're working with, that's a great way to process. Talking to a friend isn't always helpful because sometimes they just like they'll egg on like, yes, be upset with him. How could he do that? And that's not really processing. So processing has a lot of importance. in this really crucial, vulnerable, raw state. And that's what can help you not have these big explosions because it's almost like I don't know if this is a correct metaphor, but it's almost like biting an apple and instead of chewing it and having your body digest it, you just bite off a big chunk and it gets stuck. I don't
I
know. That's
love that metaphor. No,
I
that
don't know.
works for me.
It's like for me, processing emotions is digesting and really chewing the food before you swallow, rather than having it sit there and at some point you're not going to feel that great, right? And so that's what comes to mind. And I think processing is a really crucial piece in making sure that you're hearing your first of all, when you said we're silencing ourselves, yes, I think moms don't even acknowledge their own pain to be even able to talk about it to their partners. So
Yeah.
first you have to acknowledge it.
Yes, that's so true. And what do we say to our partners when we begin to recognize that this is what is happening, that we're really overwhelmed, that maybe we're struggling more than we thought we would, or it's just been a really hard day and we're feeling all of that building? How do you talk to couples about what to do in those moments?
Yeah. So, assuming we haven't worked on it before, and again, this is the amazing part in working on these things before giving birth is you
Yeah.
talk about it, and I'll bring up hypothetical scenarios, frustrating scenarios, and we'll role play. Like what is a correct and healthy way to handle these situations? Now, will they remember it all the time in postpartum? Maybe not, but if they're still working with me, I can, kind of help them reflect on it, help them remember and practice and be on top of it. But one of the I think healthiest way to approach this is to just be honest and show your vulnerability to your partner. What often happens is we don't say, "I'm overwhelmed," and we say, "How many times can I tell you, pick up your shoes?" Or, "Why do I have to always say the same thing?" Like, we come in with so much anger rather than saying, "I'm feeling so overwhelmed." If you just pick up your shoes and put them in the right place, that alone makes me feel like one task is off my plate. That's
Mm.
different. So it's all about how you say something.
And for the partner, I often think about the partners and how, if I could clone myself and find a whole other lifetime full of time and energy and capacity, I would love to talk to partners more about matrescence and really create a space for them to understand what's going on in this new mother's body and brain so that they can come to this with a clearer understanding as well. What do you say to partners who are sometimes, I picture in my mind like this deer in a headlight, stuck in the headlights, where they're like, oh my, what? Like, I'm sorry. I've just walked through the front door and said, how was your day? I mean, and I say this from my own experience too. Like, I remember sometimes talk about being flooded. Like, he would walk in and just say, what did you do today? Simple question, Amy, just a very simple question. And the feelings that would overcome me because, I mean, most of it doesn't even make sense logically, but emotionally and hormonally and in my physical body, I wanted to throw something.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
So, what do we say to these partners? Maybe a mama who's listening would like to send this to her partner to sort
Yeah.
of try and help them understand what's going on within. How do you talk to partners about this?
It's not personal. I think that's
Yeah, I
one
love that.
to remember is you are a team, and it often feels like during this very difficult new stage, partners turn against each other rather than turning towards each other. And
Mm.
one of the things we do if we are preparing for postpartum is I'll have them create like post-its around the house, especially if it's like a week away from baby being born. And they'll write things like, "It's not personal. I always love you. I choose you." Things like that can be just empowering.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, because we forget. We forget. I remember even for me, someone told me while I was pregnant, like, "Oh, just wait, you're going to hate your husband." And I was like, "There's no way. What do you mean? I love him so much. We are stronger than ever. It's gonna be great." Again, that naiveness. And sure enough, there were moments, many moments where I felt like we're not on the same team, and every breath, every step cause that inner anger that you were just describing. And
Mm,
I think that has to do with the amount of mental load that's put on moms. And,
mm,
you know, and partners are and dads are just trying to do their part of it, but it's hard because they didn't go to the through the pregnancy. They didn't go through the birth. So no matter how involved and supportive your partner is, there's still this difference, biological difference that will never make them actually truly understand. And I think oftentimes moms use that as something that makes them become against each other,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of it. And so saying, I would say to those partners, it's not personal. She's going through her own transformation. Dads are also going through their own transformation. 1 in 10 dads experience postpartum depression.
Hmm.
We forget that, right? It's
Yes.
about both people changing and coming into this new whole life transition.
Mm,
So, if we prepare for postpartum and I'm working with a couple, we'll talk about ways of reconnecting. What are things that you both enjoy doing right now? And can you do that for each other in the postpartum phase?
mm,
If a partner just asks, "What can I help you with today?" I think that's like a magical question that you can ask. You
yeah.
know, it's not so much about fixing things, it's not so much about like solutions. Sometimes it's saying, "I see the hard work you're doing." Honestly, I think there's like maybe 5 things to say that can, have you like you'll win your wife back over and everything will be fine. It's not that
That
complicated.
that is a best-selling book. If you the 5 things to say to a
Yeah,
new mother
yeah,
will
right?
save your marriage.
Right, to save your marriage. I mean, all we need as moms is just validation. And when
Yeah.
you said, he walked in and said, "What did you do today?" I already know what you were feeling without you even telling me as a mom.
Yeah.
What do you
Mhm.
mean, what did I do today? What did I do today? And
Yes. I
all of
kept a
our
child alive.
exactly. And it's like,
Yes.
no, sometimes it's just a question of what was your day like? I want to hear about your day.
Yeah.
And so it's not always, we're a team, we're not against each other. I think that's a big one to remember.
Yes, it's the invisibility we feel in those early months that really get triggered in that relationship. I love that idea about the post-it notes around
Yeah.
before the baby arrives, or even if you're listening and your baby's already here. I think that's such a great idea, and that it's not personal. Because again, we don't talk about this enough. We don't talk about those feelings and the space that comes between you two in a new, with a new baby, and that the relationship needs to evolve like you're evolving as a family. And so often we then therefore in our minds think, oh my god, maybe this isn't going to work. Like we jump to catastrophe because we're so exhausted and we're so overwhelmed. We jump to, oh my gosh, what if this does? So by just putting language around it and flagging it right from the beginning, this may show up. This is how you might feel. It doesn't mean that there's unrepairable cracks here. Like that would be such an incredible education going into new parenthood, more than, how to
Yes.
buy the best pram or
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And couples lack these tools. I mean, I don't, unless you're in the field of psychology or wellness and
Hmm.
self-help, most people don't have the tools on how to communicate effectively. They don't know how to process emotions. They don't know how to identify their needs. And that's the kind of work we do in therapy. And we try to get to the bottom of your triggers, right? Because that comes up in parenthood a lot. And that's why emotional flooding can happen is it could be something not even about your spouse. It could be something about how your parents parented. And it
Yeah.
trigger from there that you never realized was something that actually upsets you, and then it shows up in parenthood.
Mm.
that's why it's so important to work on these things beforehand. I'm a big believer in that, because it can prevent you from those moments of feeling like there's no repair in this,
Yeah,
because you'll
that's
have
right.
tools in your toolbox to go back to and pick back up.
Yeah. And like you said, we can't prepare for everything. So maybe we can finish here by I really love the way you said that one of your friends who's pregnant right now says sometimes you scare her.
Yeah.
I hear this a lot with our phenomenal collection of coaches and facilitators, and we have therapists and all these different women who have studied matrescence, and we have these debates in our calls often. How do we talk about this and prepare parents to be differently without scaring the crap out of them? you know, without sort of, because sometimes I really like the way you said our brain is almost protecting us a little bit because it is so huge. And in some level, we know it's huge. We know what's coming is going to be freaking life changing. So part of our self protection perhaps is, oh, I'll figure that out when I get there.
Yeah.
But then we fall off the cliff on the other side. So yes, for all of the amazing motherhood specialists that listen to this podcast, what would you say to that? How do we whisper the words of matrescence as I describe it in Mummerizing
I think,
without making them run?
yeah, I think it's okay that fear, shows up. We acknowledge that fear is there. We say hello to it, and we tell it to go back to the passenger seat instead of being in the
Mhm.
driver's seat. It's okay to be scared. It is something that is so scary and life changing, but we don't want to be making decisions out of fear. We want to be, educated about it, and of course leave a lot of room for things happening that we don't know about and that we don't have control over.
Mm.
But I think it's important to, have some information going in. And of course, right now it's hard because social media, there's an overload of information, right? And I try to audit the information I take in. And
Mm.
if something feels like too much, then I won't, follow a certain account, or I won't look up more information, because nowadays you can Google one thing and 300 things saying the opposite things are coming up, and you don't know which one to believe, and your doctor says something else, your mom says something else, so it's too much. I get it. um,
Mm.
I think fear is okay to have in this, understand it, get to know that part of you, get to know why it's afraid. I think those are all great things to figure out before you enter motherhood, but don't
Mm.
let fear get in the driver's seat and cause you to maybe not pursue it.
Yeah, don't make it detour
Yeah.
the awareness and education and preparation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you for the conversations you're having. I was looking at the contribution you're making to these conversations publicly in the media, and I just think it's so incredibly important that all of us in our own way are getting out there and taking this mask of motherhood off and saying, hey, this is what it's really like, and it may feel scary, but it's totally normal and you'll be okay. So thank you for what you're doing in that
Thanks
space.
so much. Thank you as well. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. I'll pop all the details of your work in the show notes, and people can reach out to you. You're in California in particular,
Yeah.
but otherwise follow you on social media. So thanks
Thank
again.
thank you.
Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mummerizing.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, If you would like to be a coach, a facilitator, and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator Training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.